I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're honoring the brave young people who helped change American history with a terrific author. One of my favorite guests, his name is Charles A. Bonner, and he has penned a book you just won't want to miss. It is called Tip of the Arrow. This powerful and inspiring book recounts the courageous journey of young student activists, many just teenagers, whose leadership helped ignite the Selma civil rights movement and paved the way for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Bonner, himself a teen leader during that era, delivers a firsthand account of the courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of justice that earned him and his fellow foot soldiers the Congressional Gold Medal. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Charles, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. I'm very grateful that you've having me back again about my book, which it is American history that should be shared with the audience.
It's an important aspect of history that I think particularly now we should remember, because it seems like a lot of the strides that Black people, African American people, and minorities made in the 1960s are at risk or under threat right now. Do you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly, and this is why we all must be very cognizant of what is going on now, very much present to what is going on now, and contrast that to what we in America, one, believe, what the Constitution provides, and what we fought for in the what I call the real true American Revolution, which was the civil rights struggle, because that was a revolution that just didn't involve all white men as the American Revolution back in the 1700s. This revolution involved the bouquet of people in America, white people, Black people, Chinese people. People came together in Selma to assure that all people had all of the rights that are guaranteed to us in the Constitution. So it's a very important book in that regard.
Tell us what it was like. You're 16 years old. You're an activist in Selma, Alabama, at a time where police are beating activists and protesters. People are being jailed. There's still a huge racial divide in this country, particularly palpable in the South. What was it like for you? Where did you get the courage and the bravery to do this? What were your parents doing, saying? Were they supportive? Go there, my son, or don't go there. I'm afraid you're going to get killed. You're going to get lynched. Tell us.
Absolutely. It's described in a word of the paradigm shift. That's a word that really only is understood by feelings. It was a late Sunday afternoon in February of '63 when my best friend and I had run out of gas in my mom's green '54 Ford, which we were pushing south on Church Street in Selma. And we saw this young man walking beneath this grocery store under the red and white Coca-Cola sign coming towards us. And he joined in pushing the car. And he announced himself as Reverend Bernard Lafayette. And as we pushed further a bit south, we turned west and half a block into my driveway of my mom's big yellow house. And he came on the porch and explained that he was from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he was there to organize the students because the parents were afraid to make the changes that were necessary to get African Americans the right to vote and civil rights. He began to explain, however, that we would go into all white establishments, we would demand to be served, we would be beaten, they would put hot coffee on us, and that some of us may be killed. But nonetheless, we must be nonviolent at all times, never striking back. My friend and I listened to this rhetoric for approximately 3 hours, and we thought he was crazy. We thought he was absolutely insane because we thought he was not aware of Sheriff Jim Clark, who was reputed to be a member of the KKK.
Right.
And we knew they were lynching Black people in Selma as well as throughout Alabama and other southern states frequently. We continued to listen to him, however, explain that Selma was 60% Black and there were very few Black registered voters because they had to pass the literacy test, frequently guessing how many jelly beans in a jar. And consequently, in the adjacent county, Lowndes County, no Black person had voted since Reconstruction, since Abraham Lincoln had freed the slave in the 12 years of Reconstruction. Sensing that we were not getting this concept of nonviolence because we had never heard of the concept and we had never allowed anyone to beat us without having some response, he pointedly asked us, he said, well, do you know Mahatma Gandhi? We said, of course. He said, do you know the name of the man who killed Mahatma Gandhi? We said, no. He said, well, clearly you know Jesus Christ because you've been to Sunday school. Do you know the name of the men or the man that killed Jesus? We said, they said it was Romans, but we don't know who the names. And he said, well, the reason why you do know the names of Jesus and the names of Mahatma Gandhi, because those men were men of love and of nonviolence. And they understood that their bodies were the embodiment of the Spirit of God. And the reason you do not know the name of the man that killed Mahatma Gandhi or that killed Jesus is because they were men of hate and evil, and they didn't understand that we all were from the same creator. But that was a paradigm shift. I had grown up in a cotton field picking cotton for 1 penny a pound. Then I had, and on a cotton farm, then I had come to Selma in the 8th grade permanently and worked at a cleaners. And I was studying also to be a barber. But after listening to him, and we said, well, what are we supposed to do? And he said, well, come to the basement of the Tabernacle Church, which is a big yellow church on the main street in Selma, and bring all of you high school students from R.B. Hudson High with you to the basement, and we will teach you nonviolence, and we will teach you freedom songs, and you will change Selma, you will change Alabama, you will change America. And we did that. And we continued to practice nonviolence and study for 6 months, from March all the way until September 16th. September 16th, 1963 was the day after they killed the 4 girls in Birmingham. The KKK blew the church up, the 16th Street Baptist Church, killed these 4 girls who were praying in Sunday school. We students, my buddy Cleophas Hobbs and I, decided we needed to take action. We needed to protest. After all, we have been practicing nonviolence. We have been told that we would engage in direct action. Well, this was an opportunity. We went to the Freedom House, which is the house where Bernard and Cody, his wife, lived, and they were not home. They had gone to Birmingham. And so we decided, well, they told us that we would be our own leaders, that they were not our leaders, that we would lead ourselves. So we then, the following day, we went to school on that Monday, September 16th, 1963, and we told all the kids at the high school, go to Brown Chapel Church, another church. Don't go to school today. And on that particular day, we decided to go into Carter's drugstore in Selma and practice what we had been teaching, what we had been taught, by demonstrating, by going in and integrating this all-white lunch counter. A group of us went in, led by a young man named Willie C. Robinson, and we were all in tow. As we went into the door, he went to the left, bought a candy bar, and then went over to the right where the lunch counter was. There were row counters with young white kids eating their hamburgers and French fries very happily, and little green, white, brown stools they were all sitting on. And he then ordered a hamburger and a Coke. Down at the end of the counter was this white man who began to approach us, turning red as he came. And he exclaimed, well, you know, we don't serve any N-words in here. Get out of here. And as we had been taught to do, Willie C. very calmly said, well, sir, why is my money good over here at the candy counter and it's not good here at the lunch counter? This man reached under the counter, came up with an accent kind of stick and hit Willie C over the head, causing 12 stitches, blood gushed everywhere. 4 kids were arrested. The rest of us, as we've been taught, went back to the church where the rest of our kids were waiting, about 77, and we had a vote. What do? 4 kids in jail. Willie C is going to the hospital. He's bleeding. Do we go back to school, or do we get back into the streets and challenge what has happened? And most importantly, we let our kids who are in jail know that we are there to support them. Unanimously, every hand went up. We go back into the streets. And we continue to go into the streets right on through the passage of the 64 Civil Rights Act and right through Bloody Sunday, which led to the passage of the 1965 Voters' Rights Act. That was the beginning of another paradigm shift for me, because as a result of that, I was kicked out of Selma University because of my activism. And some of the young white students who had come down from San Francisco said, hey, we read that you've been expelled. 4 of you been expelled. They've let 39 back in. They didn't let you back in. Go to San Francisco and go to college, and we'll send you a Greyhound bus ticket, because one of the students, who was a Black student, Charlie Love, who was working on a master's degree at San Francisco State University, he said, I'm the Friends of SNCC president, and I will have them send you a Greyhound ticket, and you can go to San Francisco. So that's what I did. Went to San Francisco, went to college, got a degree in anthropology, went to law school, and now making another paradigm shift, because as you brought up, the same conditions that existed back in the 60s have been re-parachuted upon us again, which means that African Americans and all of us who had a commitment to inclusion have to now have that same commitment to inclusion, but we have to be self-reliant, as we always were, and now engage in not just economic development, which we've achieved, because if you were to Google how much money did African Americans spend in 2024, and including the first half of 2025, you will find that in 2024, contrary to popular opinion that African Americans are on welfare, African Americans spent $1.8 trillion in 2024, and in the first quarter of 2025, it's up to $2 trillion. We now have to industrialize. We've reached economic development coming out of slavery, without a salary, without reparations. That's where the tipping system started. You go into the restaurant now, you pay a tip. That's because they did not want to pay African Americans a wage coming out of slavery in 1865, so they started tipping. Consequently, African Americans have, through their own ingenuity, now spend $2 trillion a year, as much money as Apple, as much money as Elon Musk. But it is the most unorganized source of money there is. It's the only asset African Americans have. So now I have embarked upon the idea that we must manufacture. And so I have created a corporation called Bond Energy Global Inc. I have been, and that's a company to manufacture solar panels in my hometown of Selma, Alabama. I have been working in the solar space for 10 years in Tanzania, East Africa. I lived in Tanzania when I was working on my anthropology degree for 1.5 years. Studied the language, obtained a certificate of fluency, passed tests, oral and written. And I've been going back over and over, installing solar electricity in boys and girls dormitories, boys and girls secondary school, in birthing centers where literally doctors are delivering babies by the light on their cell phones. Now in Selma, after Reagan closed the Craig Field Air Force Base, which was the economy of Selma, Selma's economy is withering like a raisin on a vine. And in order to revitalize that, as well as in Africa, and address the 4 deficits that facing African American in the diaspora, those of us who were kidnapped and brought out of Africa, as well as the people in Africa, there are four deficits that we are facing. One, the lack of electricity, the lack of clean water, and the lack of money, and consequently, the lack of hope. I'll give you an example. Last year, my wife and I got on a ship in January and went around the world. Mm-hmm. When we went around Africa as well, starting on East Africa, going down to South Africa and coming up to West Africa, stopping at each of the various countries. When we got just off the coast of Senegal, our cruise ship was told that there were people on a boat that needed rescuing and that our ship had to go because we were the only vessel in the area. We pulled up alongside this little canoe-style fishing boat, bobbing up and down with the waves, with heads on it, and we were afraid that they would be drowned any minute. Mm-hmm. We rescued 65 young people fleeing West Africa, trying to get to Spain because there was no jobs, there was no electricity, and there was no clean water, and consequently, these young people had no hope. They were trying to leave to go where their oil, their diamonds, their bauxites, all of their treasures, particularly their gold, had gone, which is to Europe and to America. So this is an example of why there's such a need for African Americans now to be self-reliant and economically industrialized. Focus on economic industrialization. And that all grew out of the kind of paradigm shift that I experienced from Selma, Alabama, working with the civil rights movement.
Amazing. Let me ask you this about the civil rights movement. We'll go back and then we'll go forward again. Lyndon Johnson signed all of these bills into law, the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act. Was he pressured to do it? Is that the only reason he did it? I mean, I don't know what kind of man he was. He seems like he was crude and brash and crass on some levels. Did he have a paradigm shift? Did he have a moment of goodness in his heart?
He absolutely did. And some would even argue that he may have been a racist. They would argue that Abraham Lincoln may have been a racist. All of that may or may not be true. But both of those men had a understanding of who they were in terms of who the God inside of them demanded. So, yes, was he pressured? He was pressured by the movement of the young kids in Selma, Alabama. The reason I wrote this book, The Tip of the Arrow, is because contrary to the popular opinion that it was Dr. King or Jesse Jackson or some of the other icons of the movement, John Lewis, who caused the Civil Rights Act of 64 to be passed, or the Voters' Rights Act, it was the young kids, the 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, 16-year-olds, as I was at the time, who created pressure in the street that pressured President Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act, which had been proposed by President John Kennedy on June 11th, 1963. Interesting, on that same day, there was a movement out to kill civil rights leaders. The KKK wanted to kill Bernard Lafayette, who was our hero, and kill Father Willette, who was a Catholic priest in Selma, who allowed us to use his facilities, a white Catholic priest, and another, and Medgar Evers. They did kill Medgar Evers in Mississippi. And then that was the third person they would kill in Louisiana, but they couldn't find him. But that was the same day that President Johnson announced, or rather President Kennedy announced, the importance that all Americans enjoy the benefits of the 14th Amendment, that all men are created equal, and they should have the right to vote, and they should have civil rights. And so President Johnson carried out President Kennedy's bill, and yes, he was pressured, but he also understood as a Southerner that our current course, or the current course at that time, was not sustainable. And he was an extremely keen persuader. And he persuaded the Southerners that they had to pass that act. And likewise, then he worked on the 65 Voters' Rights Act. And he told Dr. King and a group of men, you have to help me get these people to understand they must give you the right to vote. Hmm. I can't do it like this. I can't do it the way we are now. Help me do that. Dr. King and his organizers, particularly former Ambassador Andrew Young and others, decided the only way to pressure the LBJ to do this is to go back into the streets in Selma. And that's what they did. We came back to Selma because they had killed a young veteran, Jimmy Lee Jackson, who tried to defend his mother from an attack at night in Marion, an adjacent town about 15 miles to the northwest of Selma. They were protesting the arrest of a young man named James Orange, who had been arrested, and they were afraid they were going to lynch him in the jail that night. So all the people went to the jail that night to be present. And the George Wallace's Alabama State Troopers, along with Jim Clark's posse, all surrounded the jail, turned the lights out, and began to beat people. And one cop pulled his gun. It was going to, he was actually pulled his nightstick, and he was going to beat Jim Lee Jackson's mother. Jim Lee Jackson stood in front of his mother, and he took out his gun and shot Jim Lee Jackson, killed him. And we then decided we should take his body 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery, to George Wallace, to protest the constant killing of civil rights workers and the constant killing of African Americans. We ended up not taking his body, but on March 7th, 1965, we embarked on that journey to walk 50 miles to Montgomery. And of course, we were slaughtered on that bridge, on the Epps Bridge. And we just had the 60th anniversary of that attempt. But that led 4 months later, on August 6, 1965, to the passage of the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 that then President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law.
Yeah. Amazing. It's amazing. For a lot of young people today, hopefully your book is a wake-up call, because this happened within your lifetime.
Yes.
This happened within my lifetime. Atrocities were carried out against African Americans in this country within our lifetimes. And now, 60 or so years later, to say, well, it's all good now because Barack Obama was president, really is just a little insane to think that the playing field has been leveled. It hasn't been. I mean, you have to look no farther than our jails to realize that there's still rampant and systemic discrimination in this country, right?
Yeah, there's an effort to take us back to the 60s, an effort to undo the Constitution, to wipe out the constitutional rights. For example, white women were not given the right to vote until 50 years after freed Black men were given the right to vote. The 15th Amendment gave freed Black men the right to vote back in 1870. White women, the wives and mothers, daughters of the men in power, didn't get the right to vote until 1920, 50 years later. And still, we have not had a woman president in America. Still, women are still struggling for equal rights in America, white women, all women. And the reason why the 1965 Voters' Rights Act was so powerful and really was the birth of modern democracy, because it gave everybody, including Black women, the right to vote. Black women didn't get the right to vote again until 1965 because of Selma. So Selma is the mecca of civil rights for America. And now they want to take it away. They passed all the laws to take away the right to vote. They've decimated the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 by removing Section 4, the enforcement provision that required anyone who attempted to limit those rights to first have to seek permission from the federal government. They've taken that away. The Supreme Court removed that. The law is still good, but they're chipping it away at it as much as they can. They're trying to suppress the vote again.
What's the future What do you hope that readers take away from your book? What do you hope that people learn? What's the big picture? What's the message?
The big message is that freedom is a precious commodity that requires a constant struggle. It requires leadership from the young people. And in fact, the reason why the title of the book is Tip of the Arrow,
Mhm.
um, the Selma Student Nonviolent Movement, a study in leadership.
Mm.
We have to have young people take the leadership role because people at our age, we are settled, we have our jobs, we have our careers, and we don't have the same fire in the belly as the young people. The young people are fired up about injustice. They have that fire in the belly to get out there and demonstrate. And so this book hopefully will be kind of a, a template as to how to lead a movement and how to make systemic changes nonviolently, not engaging in the conduct that they're engaging in, which is violence,
Mhm.
which they've maintained power forever, but to do it in a loving, peaceful way, and most importantly, nonviolently.
Don't want to inject Trump too much into this, but I will ask you about him. Um, it's hard to pin him down. Like I said, it was hard to pin down LBJ as well. I mean,
Yeah.
because on some levels, Trump has a good record of good relations with African American leaders, including at one time, Al Sharpton.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
what's your take on him? Do you think he's a racist? Do you think he's just appealing to the worst demons within a large section of the electorate? What are your thoughts?
I think if you look at his history, you look at the facts. One of all, his grandparents are from Germany.
Mhm.
Uh, his father was arrested at a KKK rally in New York. There's a big
Mhm.
publication about that. His father was sued for discriminating against African Americans in housing in New York.
Mhm.
So if you look at Trump, who was steeped in this kind of culture, and you ask yourself, well, is he sexist or is he a racist? We all have some kind of prejudice baggage that we carry around based on our environment.
And your
So
age, right? And also his age. He's grew
in
up in an
his
era where men acted a certain way towards women that would be reprehensible today, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So he is soaked in that culture like an innocent cucumber is soaked in the vinegar that comes out to be a pickle. And you can't extract the vinegar out of an innocent cucumber. You
Yeah.
can't remove it.
Right.
Once the
Exactly.
pickle is, you're done. So the conclusion is that Trump is steeped in some kind of prejudice against women, against African Americans. And of course, at one point, he was a Democrat,
Yeah.
but he's also opportunistic.
Yeah. I
He,
mean, I
he's
think
sort of
that's
like
the
Elon
bottom
Musk.
line. It's about what serves his needs best at the moment,
Ex-
right?
exactly. Just
Yeah.
like Elon Musk. Elon Musk was always a Democrat. He had received $35 billion of taxpayers' money from Obama. He and Obama toured Tesla and SpaceX, and he got Obama to give him $35 billion. And he was really all buddy buddy
Yeah.
with the black community. Of course, having come out of South Africa, he came out of an apartheid racist regime. Um, he and Trump are the same type of opportunistic politicians, except Elon is not really a politician. He's just an opportunistic entrepreneur.
Right.
Um, so these people who are who they are, and we have to go on and show them, as Gandhi said, the change we want to see. We have to just be the other side of the coin and oppose any of their attempt to restrict our rights. And the courts are doing a good job of that.
Charles, let me ask you a final question here. Would you like to see Tip of the Arrow turned into either a film or a documentary? I mean, as you're telling the story of your role in Selma, I'm absolutely riveted. It's an amazing account. And, I think, real good, strong interviews with people like yourself who were there as teens would make great television and beyond that, be a great public service.
Absolutely. I think the book, not to be egotistical about it, but because it is American history and because Americans need to know about American history, particularly now when they're trying to erase or limit the sharing of American history, I think the tip of the arrow should be made into a series
Yeah.
because of course, it's 900 pages.
Yes.
Because I want to include everyone who was involved in creating this dynamic, including Jim Clark. If you notice, I have a full-page interview with
Yeah.
Jim Clark. He autographed the book to me. This page, the front of the page is me at 17 years old, standing in front of Jim Clark, seeing him. Ain't gonna let Jim Clark turn me around. And I found him in a rest home and interviewed him, and then he signed the picture to me. I told him he and I were the heroes of the civil rights movement, the villain and the antagonist and the protagonist.
Exactly. The hero and the anti-hero, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
a great.
This definitely should be made into a movie, at best, a series.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because I think, like I said, it would not only be entertaining, of course, and riveting on one level, but performing a great public service. The name of the
Yes.
book we've been talking about today is Tip of the Arrow, a firsthand account of the courage, sacrifice, and youth-led leadership that helped transform a nation. Charles, thanks so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm grateful for it. And I'd like to make one last comment.
Sure.
I was in Jerusalem on one occasion, and Jerusalem is created into a four square old Jerusalem area. One area is for the Jews, one area is for the Christians, and another area is for the Islam people, and the fourth one is for the Armenians. I went into the Palestinian area and I asked, well, how are Palestinians being treated here? And it was a clothing store with red and yellow and green fabric hanging. And the man beckoned to me and asked me to follow him. And I went around this hanging cloth. And when we got into the back, he said, you want to know how we are treated here? Well, you know how the people were treated in Selma, Alabama? And I go, wow, that is shocking. Because I then, of course, went on to relate that I was in Selma, Alabama, and I knew exactly how we were treated. But that's how far wide the influence of the children's movement in Selma has spread to the whole world.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a mess over there in the Middle East, what's happening with the Palestinians and with Israel. No quick solutions on the horizon, that's for sure. And, the bloodshed is incalculable at this point. And it's horrendous. I mean, anytime there's a war, it's horrendous because the people who are the most innocent are the ones that suffer the most.
Exactly.
Ukraine, Palestine, you name it, it's a travesty. Charles, thanks so much for your insight, your wisdom, and of course, your candor today.
Thank you very much, Logan. I look forward to the next book that I'm going to write. Take care.
All right. Do you have a working title for it yet?
Yes, it's called Blacklist, the story of Latimer and his invention of the light bulb by Lewis Howard Latimer, who invented the light bulb. Yeah.
And I'd imagine he's an African-American male?
He's an African-American who worked with several people. He went to London and lit up London, then to Montreal, learned French and lit up Montreal. But he worked with Thomas Edison. And Edison could not get a filament to glow. And he learned about Lewis Howard Latimer and it had to have him. He was the only African-American among the 28 Edison pioneers. And it was involved in many of Edison's adventures, but nobody knows about it.
Until now. Looking forward to your book and looking forward to drilling down on that topic more, no doubt. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.